Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 674. I'm Tom Cagley, your host today. In the essay, prioritization requires a steady hand and consistency. The process for prioritization should have more in common with a well-oiled basketball or football team than a 5-year-old playing soccer in the schoolyard. How the moving parts work together is a process. And I know that in some circles, process is a dirty word. On the conversation side of this podcast, Jeremy Berriault brings his QA corner to the cast. We discuss test automation plans and strategies in Agile. It really is a thing. In upcoming events, this is the last call for the Agile Online Summit. It happens this week, October 25th through the 26th. So if you're listening on the 28th, you missed it. How about next year? Tom Henricksen delivers one of the most innovative online conferences there is. This year, he has upped the bar again, and you can attend for free, or there are ways to pay a little bit and get a lot more out of it. Use the link in the show notes so that they know where you came from. I look forward to seeing you in the audience. Jeremy Berriault, creator and guru of the QA Corner here on the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Welcome back this month.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
It's funny. I noticed that the last one went up, and we've been getting back to monthly, but it was snowing last time we recorded. We have talked a lot in between, but we haven't recorded in a while.
Well, it is getting cooler out here. It's not snowing yet, but yeah, I guess so. It's been definitely a couple seasons.
Yeah, there you go. At least one season since you live in the Great White North. Yeah, in where you live, don't they just have two seasons? Spring and winter?
Oh, no. We have summer and fall.
I know you do. I love, to be honest with you, you live near up in Toronto, and very frankly, that is one of my favorite places in the world. So someday over the rainbow, I may come visit again.
No, looking forward to that.
Me too. Especially since I'm thirsty, and it was National Beer Drinking Day yesterday. Oh well. Jeremy, test automation strategy in Agile. Is that really a thing?
It should be. If you look at everything going on and what people say, you can go through YouTube and Google search. You'll see a lot of talk about the importance of using automation in an agile environment. So whether you're Scrum, Safe, Less, you name it, you do need like a good automation strategy set in place so that when you're done incrementing and building, you can basically regression test that overnight or off hours while the rest of the team focuses on the important work going through in the next iteration.
So line this up for me so that I understand what you're suggesting.
Most of the teams that I have worked with, it was the automation, the way the process was put in place was to automate the scripts and the test cases that were done in the current sprint so that they can run in the future sprint. Now, I know there are teams out there where they try to automate or they pre-automate a test script using TDD to get stuff sort of set ahead of time to try to run when the code is ready. And like that's one strategy, and that's a good strategy. I like that strategy as well. But I think most teams where they sit and how they are, they're almost, the automation team, for them to run their scripts is almost maybe one sprint behind the actual ticket and the coding and the manual testing, the pushing of actual buttons, testing is going on, and validation. And once that ticket is done, then the automation takes over in the following sprint to regression test against it.
What's the risk of things happening in the following sprint?
Some of the risks would be probably just mostly, to me, I think would be more from just a timing, and you're a little bit behind to where you should be. Now, I've worked with one team where we focused on our strategy to try to at least run the script prior to the sprint end to get that amount of work done. And we were able to get to that point. So then we knew from once the increment is done and then we move on to the next sprint, to the next set of stories, that level of code was tested enough before it went into the release kind of container overall.
So you were at that point, you weren't building on potential quicksand.
Well, yeah, it was, I would say it was a bit hairy with how everything was going. It wasn't fun going through it because it is a bit painful because you got a lot of people doing a lot of bit of coding, whether on the coding on the actual ticket, like on the feature, on the enhancement, and you have the automation team trying to run their code and make sure that everything is kind of retrofitted, everything's working as it should, and almost kind of going blind for a little bit to get something to run. If you run one sprint behind for that blindness, so to speak, is sort of gone because now the developers in the QA and the product owner, product managers that work through those tickets in that sprint, everyone is okay with the expected outcome and the results. Now the automation team can take that, code it, and send it through, knowing that everyone knows what to expect going out. And that's, like I said, it takes away some of that blindness away because they know what to do, but there's still some issues. Like you still got kind of the run stuff issues that could come across with any sort of automation or any sort of coding.
So tell me what's in your practice, what should a test automation strategy in Agile be? What should it look like? What kind of things would you put in that?
Everyone's been like a lot of work has gone into containers, Kubernetes, kind of creating those sub environments for software, especially in the SaaS world. And I think with that, there's the opportunity to create your test automation environment in that container Kubernetes type environment. And I think that's where that's where the focus should be. And there are articles I've seen talks where people bring that up, is to test in the container, to create a container and run your JavaScripts, your Cucumber, but it allows you to run those tests within that environment without actually blowing up any environment, which is the best part about containers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the trend is going right now, is to test in the container instead of in an actual environment. And I think that's where a lot of teams, especially automation leads, should start focusing their strategy on how to move their work into that environment. Because then the opportunity there they can come across is they can run their automation, like their regression scripts, in that container instead of before it even goes into the environment. So they can help find potential issues even sooner.
So I think finding and getting fast feedback is obviously a very important concept in Agile. So is the strategy just to do it in containers? What else would be in that strategy that all teams, all products should have?
Partly for me would be to also to create, like you said, fast feedback. So create a feedback loop across everyone within the team. Now, most teams that I've seen, the automation team is completely separate from the sprint teams, from the development teams. And I think one of the things that really worked for me with a couple of teams that I worked with was I put an automation person within each sprint team. So it just added to that development team, and that there created that closer feedback loop. Closer feedback loop. So the communication, so they almost turned into a TBD environment to help get the code across. So you had the QA analyst, the tester, you had the automation analyst, you had the product owner and the developer all working together and building something so that they can test what they can and get that automated as best they can before it even gets shipped out the door, before their definition of done.
Cool. That makes sense. What happens when a team or a team of teams supporting a product don't have a strategy?
There would still be some success, I believe. Like the teams will work together to get the job done. They will, with the agile behaviors, the mindset, whatever we want to call it, the evolution of agile within the teams, they will, if they still work together without any silos, they'll get the work done. The issue where what will probably come up is that there will be probably a lower efficiency in getting that work done. Like they'll still be productive, they'll still provide value, but the ability to provide that value at a even more valuable pace. I don't want to say speed, but I think I want to say that to provide more value within the team and within setting up the products, I think that's where they'll be lacking. I think that's almost leaving stuff on the table that could be used for later.
If you were going to give a Scrum Master or an Agile coach 2 pieces of advice about a test automation strategy for their team, their sprint, their product, what would those 2 pieces of advice be?
One would be to understand the flow of going from start to finish within a ticket, on how the ticket is worked on between everyone, how the flow of information between the automation team, if they are kind of segregated from everyone else, and start asking questions why certain things are happening. Like you don't have to fully know everything about automation, but at least if you're able to ask the questions to the teams and they're able to give you a good answer to explain it to you, then that's a good hint that they have an idea from a strategy perspective on how to get the work done. I think the second piece would be just to even just ask the leads, like, what is the strategy? Like, is there something somewhere? It doesn't have to be hard and fast rules of thou shalt do this, this, and this, but they should still have some guidelines to how they're going to approach the automation, how they're going to approach the work, and have maybe even their own internal definition of done for their particular job. Like it's no different than creating a team charter for a sprint team. Some team charters are 5-6 bullet points on how they're going to work together. A automation strategy doesn't have to be a very long, intensive document. It doesn't have to be a long, intensive wiki page, but it should have something in place to say, this is how we're going to flow and this is how we're going to work.
Jeremy, if people wanted to continue the conversation, how would they go about doing that? Where would they find you?
They can find me just outside of Toronto. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can search for my name, Jeremy Berriault. You will. There's only, I think, a couple Jeremy Berriaults out there, but you'll see my lovely picture, and you can catch me through there. I am at Twitter at jberriault. You can also get a hold of me through my website, berrieautassociates.com. And feel free, contact me. Let's continue the conversation.
Jeremy, as usual, you really give us a lot to think about. Thank you for bringing your wonderful QA corner to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
It is always a pleasure to be here, Tom.
Work Entry, Poor Prioritization Processes by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. Prioritization requires a steady hand and consistency. The process for prioritization should have more in common with a well-oiled basketball team or football team than 5-year-olds playing soccer in the schoolyard here in the States. How the moving parts work together is a process, but in some circles, process is a dirty word. That reaction leads to all sorts of expensive and avoidable problems when processes are abandoned or not fixed. The problem with the knee-jerk reaction, and it really is a reaction, to the word is that most everything in the world involves process, from sex, look it up on WebMD, to making coffee. Even the ubiquitous Agile framework Scrum leverages processes. The real culprit is not processes per se, but rather adopting bad or inappropriate processes. 4 classic process problem categories that have a negative impact on prioritization include 1. Fire and forget. This category includes all of those prioritization processes that never go back and find out if the criteria used during prioritization actually panned out. The lack of follow-up to determine if the cost, ROI, increases in sales, throughput, or quality that defined impact and importance were true make it very easy to shade or spin the story to make any piece of work look more important. Doing the work that isn't the most important leaves money on the table and puts jobs at risk. Solution. Real simple. Measure the impact of every significant piece of work on the flow, using the flow framework. Simple solution, measure the impact of every significant piece of work. 2. Random walk. There is nothing more frustrating than building a case for a piece of work only to find out that the goalposts moved or that the rules you have to play by are not the rules others run by. Once upon a time, I was a department manager at a major financial institution. I worked with great people. I did fun work, but the process for getting anything approved changed at least quarterly and sometimes as we were working through the prioritization process itself. Our department required a full-time financial analyst. And that's not an apocryphal statement. When circumstances changed, it was hard to react. The process had become so complex and brittle that anything other than an act of God was ignored. We did a lot of stuff that was not as high value as it should have been. A special case in this category is the perception that the rules are not transparent. This is the situation in which different teams or parts of the organization live by or have different criteria for getting work prioritized and accepted. During university, I worked with a firm that was privately held by a single family. Projects proposed or supported by specific family members were always jumped to the head of the list, even though sales and profit were the published criteria. Solution. Establish a stable approach to prioritization. Ensure everyone involved has understanding of the criteria and the rules for prioritization. When the process evolves, and it will, make sure all the stakeholders are aware. Another part of the solution would be to involve the stakeholders in the evolution of the process. Getting stakeholders of the process together to design and build the process invokes the IKEA effect. Dan Ariely describes the effect as the basic idea is that after we devote effort to something, we have a more positive feeling toward it. we become attached. 3. Magical thinking. Just declaring a process exists and that the most important work is always at the top of the list does not mean that the work of prioritization is done. Rarely is there one single key approach or metric that forecasts what will be important next week, let alone next quarter. Prioritization needs to account for differences in evaluation criteria, time horizons, without reverting to an ad hoc process. Solution: break work into smaller, independent pieces to reduce priority drift due to longer time horizons. Reprioritize more often. Do this publicly to avoid the perception of capriciousness. Finally, garbage in, garbage out, or a similar case, garbage in, gospel out. This scenario is fairly common, often caused when the process is a check-the-box event or when no one does any due diligence on the rationale for why any piece of work is more important than another. Another common cause of this phenomena occurs when the goal of the organization or subgroup is nebulous. Not understanding where the organization is headed generates crappy decisions because it's impossible to have the proper context. Solution: have a prioritization process, use it. Care about the prioritization as a way of working. Make sure that proponents for work are responsible for shepherding it through the prioritization and delivery. Make sure someone with the right level of authority is responsible for attaining the results. That individual needs also to have the responsibility for letting the organization know if the context shifts and when to redeploy resources and people. Poor process leads to doing the wrong work, or as bad, doing the right work at the wrong time. Most of the time, issues in this story are self-inflicted wounds. Have a process, use the process, make sure everyone understands the process. This doesn't guarantee you will do the right stuff, but it increases the likelihood. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com or leave a message at 01440-668-5717. We look forward to the conversation. In Reread Saturday News, this week we dive into Chapter 4 of Project to Product, titled Capturing Flow Metrics. Why capture flow metrics? The 4 components of the flow distribution reflect an investment pattern within the value stream. It's really important because that's the core of why any business exists. Links in the show notes to this week's installment and the previous 4. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 675, we feature another essay. Perhaps even the promised why pragmatic has become code for half-assed. We also have a visit from Susan Parente with her I'm Not a Scrumdimentalist column. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?